Yes, thank you. Just a few words of background. I'm a political scientist, so I approach this from a slightly different perspective. And when I say we, I point to Roger Code here, and I and Lee Gordinker and a Swedish colleague of mine called Peter Söderholm wrote a book years ago about international cooperation in response to AIDS, where we covered the early years from the WHO Global Program on AIDS until the creation and the agreement on establishing UNAIDS. I'm coming back to the subject area now within the context of a different research, a larger research program which deals with various ways of getting transnational actors, non-governmental actors into global governance in various areas. AIDS is a very pertinent case. It's almost as close as we come to an experimental situation as social scientists, because so much is going on and so many different forms of organization and governance are tried out in this field. And we are in particular interested in the emergence of various forms of public-private partnerships. Well, the interface and the diffuse borderline between public and private are prominent in the issue area of global public health. I mean, on the one hand, health has usually been regarded as a global public good, whose delivery is the responsibility of governments or intergovernmental organizations. On the other hand, we have transnational pharmaceutical corporations, civil society actors that are today important contributors to the provision of this public good. The international efforts at halting the spread of HIV and AIDS reflect and have contributed to this general trend. At the same time, I think it's worth noting that there are some some peculiarities about this pandemic which differs from other health issues and also from previous epidemics in several significant respects. First of all, it represents what some people have called a long wave event. Large-scale effects emerge gradually over decades. The long incubation period and so forth, the sexual nature of transmission. Someone says that, I have estimated that the full wavelength of the HIV epidemic curve is probably somewhere in between 50 and 120 years. I think such long-term ramifications require long-term thinking, which falls outside the horizons of most politicians and business leaders. Also, a second thing is that unlike the victims of earlier epidemics, HIV-infected persons are normally in their productive and reproductive age. This contributes to the spread, but it's also they can get their voices heard. For the first time, we have patients becoming powerful pressure groups, and as you alluded to also, the AIDS has a special connection to human rights, which makes it peculiar in that way. And finally, I think it's increasingly recognized that AIDS is a political issue. it's an issue that needs political solutions. It's a medical issue, yes, but so far without a definitive medical solution, and it involves a lot of politics. So then it's very, I mean, it's an obvious candidate for public-private partnerships. I mean, it's amenable to cooperation and conflict among a wide variety of actors at all levels. It's very difficult to define what a public. We always try to define our concepts. It's very difficult to define what a public-private partnership is because it can take so many different forms. The common denominator is that it's a hybrid organization involving both public and private actors on a voluntary basis. And in addition, usually they have a common goal, some explicit division of labor, shared risks and benefits, and some form of joint decision-making. I will say just a few words about the development from, I mean, when in 1987 the global program on AIDS was created, it was endorsed by all governments, the whole UN system and so forth, and the WHO became sort of the lead agency in the fight against AIDS. To make a long story short, it's a long story, we could write a book about it, we did. The authority of WHO came increasingly in question because it was a medical problem, yes, but the solutions seem to lie elsewhere, and other organizations say that we have part of the solution, whether it be education or protection of human rights, etc., or the provision of funds, the World Bank, for instance. So this led to a lot of criticism of WHO and negotiations that led eventually in 1994 to an agreement to launch a new joint and co-sponsored UN program by January 1996, and that was the birth of UNAIDS. And UNAIDS has, as you probably know, a number of UN agencies as founding partners. In addition, there are representatives of governments from all geographical regions and 5 NGO representatives, including associations of people living with HIV and AIDS. These are all represented on the program coordinating board. And you could say that UNAIDS was really the first public-private partnership in this area. Around the turn of the century, I think also UNAIDS started to build a solid base of scientific studies of HIV prevalence and of successful AIDS programs like we've seen here. And they contribute to renewing a global interest in the pandemic around the turn of the century. There was, in January the year 2000, the UN Security Council for the first time debated AIDS as a global security threat. In July the same year, at the GA summit in Okinawa, they adopted the Okinawa Infectious Diseases Initiative, identifying AIDS as a formidable challenge for global development. And then, as you know, the combat of AIDS is also in the Millennium Development Goals. And in June 2001, the UN General Assembly held a special session on HIV/AIDS, UN, or UNGAS, yeah, which adopted a declaration and so on. But it was the first time such a session had been convened to discuss a health issue.